About a year ago, I made a video called One Ink 13 Pens, where I compared the Benu Fine, Medium, and Broad against 10 other fountain pen brands and nibs. And I had a lot of fun making that video, so I had always meant to come back and do a part 2, but it's taken me a little while to get here. So today I am going to be comparing 6 different Benu nibs. So this would be what I believe is their current entire steel nib lineup. We're going to take a look at how these nibs perform against each other. And instead of always using Konpeki, which is the ink color that I always ink new pens up with so that I can compare them against each other, I wanted to switch things up and use different inks to show how they perform with other ink properties. So I've chosen a chromashading ink, and I've also chosen a shimmer ink, and we're going to take a look at how those look today. Before I get into it though, I'm gonna go to my little stationery shop and I'm gonna grab some supplies. So I'm gonna go do that and then I will meet you back here. Okay, so I have grabbed my 2 Benu pens. These are the 2 Benu pens that are in my collection. At the time of making that video, I also had another pen, but I ended up gifting that to someone as part of a giveaway that I ran with that video. So these are the only 2 Benu pens that I have kept, and this is a bit of a side story, but I do want to tell it. So let me just unpack what I kind of picked up from my little shop. I had brought this Benu pen out with me to a cafe, and it ended up rolling off the table and falling onto the ground, which was devastating because I ended up cracking the cap. So I ended up reaching out to Benu and I asked if they happened to have a cap for this pen that I could repurchase. And they so kindly sent me a new cap without question. And while we were at it, I asked if they would be willing to send me a few other nibs to complete my Benu nib collection. Because as much as I get really tempted sometimes to pick up multiple pens so that I can try different nibs, one of my favorite things about Benu, as well as some other pen brands, like I believe Esterbrook does this, as well as Kaweco and Lamy. I love that you can buy individual nibs. And so if you do want to try different nib sizes, you don't necessarily have to buy a whole new pen. That's just something that kind of helps me keep my pen collection down because I am someone who enjoys trying different nibs depending on the ink that I'm using. And I do like to have different nib options when I'm picking my pen, but it's rare that I'm actually going to use, 6 different pens at the same time. It's usually 1 nib at a time, if that makes sense. And so they very kindly sent me the nibs that I didn't already have. So I already had a fine and a medium in this Benu Talisman. And then I had the 1.1 stub in this Benu Euphoria. This is their Milk and Honey. And I have been using this consistently ever since I got it. And this one is the Benu Talisman Tiger's Eye. I will admit, if I were starting out my Benu collection today, there are other talisman models that have really caught my eye. For example, there's a pink opal one that I've seen on Bookish Mandy's channel and Anna Jolene's channel, and I absolutely adore that pen. Opal is my birthstone, and I have a little opal on my ring here. And to hear that there's little bits of opal in the actual pen itself is just amazing. I briefly looked into getting an Oporex pen a couple of years ago. I haven't actually taken the step to get one. So when I saw that, I admit I was very, very tempted. It is on my wish list right now. But for now, these are my two Benu pens. And I wanted to, I guess, just highlight how great the customer service is at Benu, but also highlight the fact that you can swap your nibs and you don't necessarily have to buy a whole new pen, which I am a big fan of. As far as the nibs that we're going to look at today, I keep them in this Altoids box. At some point, maybe I'll have a better way to store them, but I just wanted to kind of keep them all together. So currently in here, I've got my 1.1 stub. And in here, I have my, I have the 1.5 stub. So right now I have both stub nibs in these pens. But I also have, this is the broad. This is the fine, and you can see they just have the little letter on the front of the nib if you're ever looking to tell. This is the fine flex. I really need to get like a proper pen tray someday, but that's a someday. That's on the wish list. And then this is a medium, if you can see that. So one thing that Benu mentioned to me is that I believe the regular fine, medium, and broad nibs are Yovo. I think that's how you pronounce it, Yovo nibs. And the fine flex and these other, the two stub nibs are Schmidt nibs. And you can actually kind of tell because they look like they have a little bit of a different design on them. That's just something to keep in mind. And the reason why this is important is because I believe the implication there is that you can't just switch a Yovo nib into a Schmidt nib housing. And so when they sent me these extra nibs, they did warn me that you can't necessarily just interchange them. And so that's why some of them are in this talisman housing, and these other two are in the Euphoria. Even though I believe all of these are the same size nibs, it's just good to know. So if you ever do decide to get different nibs, I think you have to be a little careful. If, for example, like if you buy the stub nib and you want to get a medium, then you might have to just get a whole new housing. Like you wouldn't be able to just pop out the nib and put it into here. So that's just the one thing to keep in mind. But they all use the same standard cartridge. They're all able to use the same standard cartridge. For here, I just have, actually, I don't know if that's true. Like I have a Schmidt cartridge, but I think it's fine. Yeah, it just pops in here really easily. Yeah, that's the only thing to keep in mind. I do have like a few different converters. Like this one is the Kaweco converter, and I haven't really had any issues using this with any of these pens. So you can use the longer ones, but you can also use these smaller ones, and it's been pretty okay for me. So yeah, in terms of converters, I find that there are a few different options out there, which is maybe a little bit easier than, say, some of your Japanese pens where you have to use like a Pilot converter or cartridge with Pilot Sailor with Sailor, Platinum with Platinum. So I do like that there's a little more variety here. Just going to put them back. So they come with these little caps. They don't really stay on, but I do keep, at least I feel like they protect them a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck these away. But if you have any questions about these nibs, let me know. So I'm just going to put those here. I do have a few different books that I use for my pen and ink log, and I think part of the reason is because I haven't really found something that feels like it really clicks. This is the first iteration of my pen and ink log that I came up with, and it's in a traveler's notebook cover. And I've shown this on my channel a few times, but basically I have two books because my pen collection has expanded. Two books that I kind of dedicate to pens. Whenever I ink the pen up, I will just log what ink is in here. And later on, I started doing longer entries just because I don't necessarily ink my pens all the time. I wanted to capture a little more of my thoughts on the ink. And then I have another book in the back here, which is supposed to be dedicated for ink bottles, and then every time I ink it in a pen, logging it on the side. But I have actually been really terrible at completing this, and it kind of makes me think that this isn't really the right method for me because I'm just not really excited to come in here. The most that I've done is I've kept up with Konpeki, so whenever I do get a pen, I usually log it in here. But this is the old Tomoe river paper, and I kind of think that I'd rather save this for something that I'm really excited for. I've been inconsistent with this book, and I think I will probably eventually someday move to some type of ring system because it does make sense as your collection changes that you might want to move things around, and I think that is one of the main drawbacks of logging things in a bound book system. But I'm just not sure what I would want to do. I also hesitate to abandon this, so I've thought about deconstructing these and maybe turning this into a rings, but it's kind of complicated because if I were to add rings to this, then the papers would have to be thinner, and I don't necessarily want to, chop that much off the paper. So I'm not sure yet, and I'm not really in a rush anyway because I have all these other notebooks that I use, and at the end of the day, if I don't have one system that catalogs all of my inks, that's okay because it really is a hobby and it's not necessarily a library. I mean, I would love to have a library of all my inks and pens, but I consider it more of like a nice to have than something that's a requirement for enjoying my hobby. So that's the first way that I kind of catalog it. This one I'm a lot more consistent in, and I think part of it is because I have just simplified it. And so this is my Konpeki longer writing sample notebook. I started this one in April of last year, and it doesn't have all of my pens, but I try to ink the pen, not dip, but ink the pen with Konpeki. And then I've just been filling them out, and sometimes I leave blank spaces when I know I want to come back, when there's a specific pen that I want to eventually ink with Konpeki and come back and do the writing sample. And this one is good because it really gives me an opportunity to look at these pens and see how well they flow. And this really tells me a lot about what I can expect if I start inking it with other inks, because I kind of know Konpeki really well. You can see in this broad nib how dark Konpeki came out. So I know right away looking at this that if I put a very light colored ink, it probably will still be legible. Whatever ink I put in here, it's going to be sort of the darkest version of that color, versus maybe something like this. This is the Benu broad, and this is the Kaweco broad, and you can see like how different these broads look. Like there's still shading in this ink that you see on this side, but here there's almost no shading, but you almost see little bits of sheen in this ink because there's so much ink that's kind of coming out on the page. So I really like this. Helps me learn a lot more about my pens, and I just update it when I can. And then I also have a quick line test. So I try to remember to draw a line. And again, I just love this overview of the different pens and how you can see it's one ink, but you can just see how different it is depending on the pen that you put it in. So I really like this as well as a reference. The last one is the newest book. This is the Chronicle Planner, and it's the Pocket Undated, and this was very kindly gifted to me by Tiffany from Faded Chronicle, and I loved this book so much, and I knew that I really wanted to use it, but I only really have one planner, as you may know, and so I wanted to come up with another way that I could really enjoy this book. It is the cutest thing. It's making me really love the pocket size. I've never really been a pocket user, but it is just so cute. And the paper inside is this really beautiful kind of creamy paper. I don't know if this is Koji paper. I will look it up on her website to confirm. But I really love the setup. In case you're unfamiliar with the Faded Chronicle Pocket, this is the Undated. I think this is a 4mm grid. And I believe this is for up to 6 months. If I were using this for 6 months, I could have important dates for up to 6 months. This could be like a habit tracker, potentially, priorities this quarter. It has a lot of really interesting structures. And when it comes to playing around with inks, I actually really like structure. That's why I really like doing my ink swatches on calendar months, because I think I just enjoy the grid. And so as I was flipping through this, I was thinking this would be so great as a place to just play with inks and really take advantage of all of these pre-lined structures. And that is kind of what I've done. I was thinking about using these calendars at the front for ink by color, but there's, I think, about six months, and I have more than 6 color families, so haven't figured out how I will use this yet. Perhaps I will just log new inks, or I'm not really too sure, but I do really love this grid, and I feel like it would be so fun to use for little ink swatches. And I also like how small this is, because if I want to bring this to like a pen meetup, it's just really tiny and doesn't take up a lot of space, which I think is good. Oh, that was the other thing, is I was thinking I could use this to log pens and inks that I try when I'm at pen meetups, potentially. So that's like another idea. I know some people, when they go to pen shows, they tend to have their own pen notebook for the pen show. So that's another thing that I was thinking I could use this for. This paper is just so lovely. And you will soon see, like, it's very fountain pen friendly as well. Because I couldn't make a decision on how to use the calendar pages yet, I went straight into the weekly spreads. So the way the Chronicle Planner is set up is, let me just show you. So you kind of get this initial weekly overview where I think you could use these boxes for maybe special events. If I were using this as a planner, I could potentially do like my meal plans up here, my to-do list here, and then there's some extra space here, maybe even for like longer to-do lists or notes. You could do like events that you need to remember here. So I love how flexible this is. Because I am someone who needs a vertical weekly, I don't think that I'd be able to use this as a planner just because of the way that I like to plan. But if you aren't someone who needs a vertical weekly, I think this is a really compelling layout. After you get your weekly, you get 8 of these blank pages. So you could do your journaling in here, you could do your to-do list in here. So I think that's really great. And then it just continues for the rest of the book. I thought it would be kind of fun to use the pages as a way to compare the different nib sizes. I specifically chose a chroma shading ink that was on the lighter side because I wanted to see how it would look in the different nibs. And I chose Sailor Manyo Ayame because it is a dual shading ink and it is on the lighter side. And I'm not going to lie, this took me a really long time because I only had 2 pens. So I had to, ink the pen and then clean it out. And definitely I could see how it would be easier to do this type of comparison if you had, 6 different pens with different nibs. But anyway, aside from doing this type of comparison, it's unlikely that I'll ever want to have all those pens inked at once. So this is what it looked like. In the top here, I just did a little bit of a scribble. And in the bottom, I did the typical like quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And I just wrote it out in each of the nibs. I drew the line over here so that we could compare the line spacing. And then I just did a bigger swatch so that I could remember what ink I used as well as see kind of what it looks like. So I'm just going to bring it closer to the camera so you can take a closer look. I was really pleasantly surprised with this ink. I mean, I already love this ink, but I just think it's so fascinating to see how different it looks depending on the pen that you're in. It's kind of interesting that the medium and the bold are a little bit lighter. I wasn't expecting that, honestly. I was expecting the bold to be like, really laying the color down thick. But it kind of looks a little more gray. The gray is coming out a little more in this medium and the bold. I mean, I put bold, I meant to say broad. And then fine, it looks a little more like a bit of a muddy green. And in the writing especially, I love that you can see that chroma shading. In the fine flex, that one I was surprised too because you can see a different shade of green compared to the fine. And then finally with the 1.1 and the 1.5 stub, you can see that the 1.5 is actually kind of hard to write with in this 4mm grid. But it definitely comes out a lot darker. Like there's a lot more of those darker shades in the writing. So I thought that was really fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why I just love playing around with ink so much and why I have kind of expanded my love of fountain pens to different fountain pen nibs because I just think you can get so much variety with just one ink bottle, and I do find that really fascinating. Then in the what is meant to be the daily pages, I've done longer writing samples. So here I've kind of written out more with that fine nib. This is the medium. This is the broad, so you can really see how much more ink is getting laid out here. And interestingly, I don't know if maybe something happened with the little scribbles here, but I think they look a lot more similar here on these individual writing samples, which is why I think it's helpful to do a longer writing sample as well. And I just picked some random poems that I wanted to copy out that I enjoyed. Oh yeah, these were some poems from a book of poems that I have at home that I haven't really read much, but you know what? I realized as I was trying to find poems in the book that I don't really enjoy the poems in the book. So that was kind of an interesting realization. And I am just realizing now that I must have forgotten to do the longer writing samples with the 1.1 and the 1.5. So I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but I'll have to go back and fill those in so you can see the writing samples for those two. So I have a little bit of homework to do before I post this video. The next one that I did was actually an ink that I got my patrons to help me decide on because I knew I wanted to do a shimmer ink, and I only have so many bottles of shimmer inks. So they picked Wearing All, the Nightingale, and the Rose, and I love this ink color so much. In fact, I've had it inked in my Pilot Parallel for almost the entire year so far. And if you've received any happy mail from me, there would be something written with this Pilot Parallel and ink combination, because I just love how a Pilot Parallel shows so much, like lays down so much ink that you do tend to see a lot of the shimmer. This is what this one looks like. So I have it in fine, fine flex, medium, broad, 1.1, 1.5. And you can see here, these are the writing samples. And what I love about this is you can see the medium and the broad really softens the color. So in this fine nib, it looks a lot darker. And same with this fine flex. But here it almost looks, I guess because it's a broader nib, like it just softens it a little bit. I don't know if you can see the shimmer. Let me see if I can. I find with wearing all inks, I do love the shimmer, but I have recently discovered how well Tomoe and Lim's shimmer inks are, and I think I would love to redo this experiment with Tomoe and Lim's shimmer ink to see how much shimmer shows up, because from my experience, just using it in a fine nib, it shows so much shimmer that I just can't wait to see like how it looks in all of these other nibs. So I think that'll be maybe my next Benu experiment. You can see that 1.5 line, like it starts to get really difficult to write in a 1.5. So I think this is a great nib for headings for me, but while I can sometimes get away with writing with my 1.1 stub nib, I don't think I can really do it with the 1.5. For my longer writing samples, I chose poems by Mary Oliver because at the time that I was doing this comparison, I had just finished reading Mary Oliver's Dog Songs book and I really enjoyed it. So I copied down some of the ones that were my favorites. So this is the fine, this is the fine flex, the medium, the broad, and I love how with the broad you really get to see some of that shading that I don't think you can see as much in the fine. And then here's the 1.1 and the 1.5. So you can see I was kind of having trouble writing with the 1.5, but I think with a bigger grid size, it would be lovely to write with. So that is my Chronicle planner, and that's kind of how I'm planning on using it. So I think I'm going to just continue exploring other inks in here. Oh, I don't know if you can see that now. Maybe this way you can see that. It has this beautiful like pink shimmer. And I think for future ones, it would be really fun to compare other brands again as well if I wanted to. So like I would love to just see how all of my broad, like I'm starting to get a bit of a collection of broad nibs. So I have a Benu broad, I have a Kaweco broad, and I have a Twisby broad, and I really enjoy all of them. So I think it would be fun to compare those broads with each other, pick an interesting ink that's not Compecky, just because I love this ink, but having used it so consistently over the last few years, I am getting a little bit sick of it. This is sort of one of my newest little experiment books, and I just love it. I love how small it is. I do really love this pocket size, and it is kind of making me think like maybe a pocket-sized planner would be really good for me because it's a little bit bigger than a passport. I feel like there's just a bit more room, but it's so small that you could fit it very easily in one hand. So that is something that I'm thinking about. Thank you, Tiffany, for sending this to me. It is such a fun little book, and I really love this paper. Just for fun, because you've now seen how these inks, these two inks look in this paper, I thought I would just do some really quick ink swatch samples in a few other pieces of paper so you can get an idea of how these inks actually look in some of the papers that you may be more familiar with in case you are not familiar with this paper. So I've got my Midori cream paper, I've got my Tomoe Sanzen. Let's just do some quick swatches here, and then we'll end the video on that. I think I'll start with the Sailor Manu ink, just because this one is a shimmer ink, so I'd prefer to keep that to the end. And I'm just going to do really big blobs because I only have 2. So today I'm going to use my Swink, I think it's called. This was a gift from my friend Wendy Sue from Fountain Pen News. So, oops, I'm just going to grab... That's a big blob. Okay, so we'll just let that dry. And then here is Nightingale in the Rose. You can see here already with this Ayame, like it's this beautiful mix of purple, green, gray. It's such a beautiful color, and it's such a fun color to write with because it's just a very beautiful ink that has a lot of different colors in it, and they show up in writing, which I do find can be kind of difficult with some inks, where in the swatches you'll see all these different colors, but then once you write with it, you'll really only see one color. And then this one is really fun, like I said, because it's already a beautiful base with this brown. I do love my brown inks, but then it has this really fun pink shimmer, and it just makes it really fun, especially when you're writing with a Pilot Parallel. Like if I were to write with this, oops. Okay. Well, almost managed to fit that in. And with the Pilot Parallel, the great thing is you can actually write on the edge and write smaller. Okay, so in terms of comparison, we have Ayame. So that's kind of what it looks like next to this Tomoe River Paper Sanzen. And then here is how it looks compared to the MD Cream. And you can also see the differences in the paper, or I hope you can see. This is the white, so this is a little creamier than the white, but it's definitely, the MD Cream paper is still creamier. So I still think that inks are going to come out looking a little warmer on this paper just because it's like a creamier paper. But this still has a very satisfying crinkle. And as much as I love MD Cream paper, I don't think MD Cream paper is the right paper for me for a planner. I think it's really fun for ink swatches and journaling and watercolor, that kind of thing. But when it comes to planning, I really adore this like thin paper because you can just fit so much in a small book. Like if this were MD Cream paper, it'd probably be like double the size. And then we have Nightingale in the Rose. It's still drying, but this is how it's looking on the Tomoe River paper. And then here's how it's looking on the MD Cream. So that is really all that I had to share with you today. I was just really excited to talk to you about playing around with nib sizes and seeing how they react to the same ink is one of my favorite ways to engage in this hobby. There's something really satisfying about finding the right pen and ink combination where an ink just looks gorgeous in the nib size that you're using it in. And of course, it would be even better to find inks that just look great in all of your nibs. And I find that Pilot Iroshizuku usually checks that box. But when it comes to some of my other favorite inks, like Sailor dual shading inks or, shimmer inks, then it becomes like a very fun experiment to see how they look. And once you find that right combination, then it just gets me really excited. So I wanted to share that with you. And also thank you, Benu, for sending me those nibs. It's been very fun to play with the different steel nibs, and it feels really cool to kind of have the full collection. And I do love their pens, and there are so many beautiful Benu pens on their website, and I have been tempted over the years to pick up more. And I think the reality is just that I do get overwhelmed if I have too many pens, and so I am always looking for ways to expand my playground without necessarily like multiplying my pens. And that's not to say that I haven't been adding to it. Like there are some other brands where I have more pens because it's not as easy to just buy the nib unit themselves. And I totally understand, like from a business perspective, it may be better to sell like pen units than it is to just sell nibs. But as a consumer, I just really appreciate having this option because it's likely that I will get another Benu at some point just because they keep coming out with such beautiful designs. But also, I think that I'm really satisfied with these two, and I have just gotten so much use out of them with my experiments and just playing around with them. And I use this pen with the 1.1 stub nib. I've been using it consistently ever since I got this pen, so it's almost never not been inked. And it's actually kind of funny that it's not inked right now because it truly has been like constantly inked ever since I got it. If you are a Benu pen user, I'd be curious to know what your favorite Benu pen is and what your favorite nib size is. If you haven't already tried Benu, I would just be curious what you would pick if you were to pick today. I would have to say for me, it would be that pink opal talisman. I really do have my eye on it, but there are plenty of other pen styles outside of the talisman and the euphoria that I have yet to try. So perhaps one of those other styles, maybe. But these are my two Benus and I do love them. So that's everything that I had for you today. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you soon in the next video.